The arcade version of 720 Degrees had a very unique controller. Basically, it was a joystick that moved around the outside of a circle and only the outside of the circle. Really what it was a spinner with a joystick handle attached to one end of it. I'll talk a little bit more about the real controller later on in the video, but MAME gives us actually 3 different options of how to control the game, and I'm going to go through them in this video. So the first thing you want to do is press tab and go down to game configuration, and you'll see there's actually 3 options of controller type. Real, if we're using the real 720 degrees controller, joystick, and spinner. So the first one I want to show you is the joystick option. So the joystick works exactly as you would expect. Make sure you're using an analog joystick, and if you are, whatever direction you move it, the skater will point towards. Unlike the arcade, you don't have to remain on the outside of the joystick axis. You can actually make little circles like this, and it'll follow the direction you push. One thing to keep in mind in this game is that if you want to get a good score, you have to spin quickly in circles like that and land in the same direction you jumped from. So this joystick might not be the best for this game, but other joysticks might work a little better. So the next controller type I want to show you is the spinner. So of course the first thing you want to do is adjust the sensitivity. So press tab and go down to analog controls, then go down to dial sensitivity. I'll provide a link to my spinner sensitivity video if you're not familiar with this. But 720 Degrees had a turn count of 144. There were 72 positions on the encoder, and each one was counted twice for a total of 144. Therefore, on the Turbo Twist 2 or the spin track, you would set your dial sensitivity to 12 in MAME. So I've done that, and I'm going to start a game. And as you can see, the skater moves about 1-to-1 with my spinner here, which is what you want. Of course, if you prefer him to move faster or slower, you can go ahead and adjust it the way you want, but that's my recommendation. Now this works fine, especially if you're just skating around the city like this. The problem comes in when you're trying to do these big jumps where you spin 360 degrees and whatnot, because like I said before, you have to land roughly the same direction you were facing when you jumped. And if you're just spinning the controller quickly like this, it can be tough to do. So it works, but you really have to have a lot of precision and control with this spinner, and that can be difficult. So now I'm going to show you the spinner I made specifically for this game. So this is the spinner I made for this game. As you can see, it's very similar to the standard spinner that comes with the Turbo Twist 2. I just added a joystick ball on one end of it, so you can kind of spin around the outside of the circle like you can on the arcade. And this way, you can always know which way your skater is facing, even when they're doing those crazy jump moves. So let me go ahead and attach this and show you a little bit of gameplay with this attachment I made. So as you can see, the skater will point in the same direction that the ball is facing, so it works pretty well. When you turn the game on, I recommend having the ball pointed straight up, north or 12 o'clock. It just seems to work better that way. Now one little issue I run into though is after a while that you're spinning this thing around doing all kinds of tricks, that the calibration actually could go off a little bit. So you see here, I have the ball facing straight down, but the skater is actually pointed a little bit to the right. So if I kind of spin in the opposite direction a couple times, it does seem to correct it. So this is actually not perfect. You do kind of get used to it, but just a word of warning if you are going to do it this way. I did, however, come up with a slightly better way to adjust your calibration while you're playing if it does go out a little bit. So I'm going to show you that right here. So the real 720 controller is definitely the best way to play it if you can find one, afford one, whatever. And the reason is because there's actually more than one encoder on it. There's the one I told you about before that has the 72 positions, but there's also a second one which is a centering encoder, which just has 2 positions on one end of it. So that way, every time the joystick is pointed towards the screen, the game knows it. And it's constantly making adjustments, so the calibration is always perfect when you're playing with that controller. So of course you can come up with a elaborate homemade spinner that could accomplish this. Certainly if you can do it and you really love the game, that's a way to do it. But this is a little trick I came up with, at least for me here. So I set it on real, and then I go to input this game. And you'll notice when you do that, there's the rotate analog, which is, my controller here. And then there's the center analog. Now, if you have a real controller or two spinners or two encoders, you would, map the center analog there. But what I do is I go down to the center analog increase, and I map a button to it. And therefore, let me show you in the game what happens. So let's say it's off a little bit, like this. When I press this button, hold it down, it actually points him north, like that. So a lot of times between levels, I'll just kind of point this up and just kind of hit this a few times, and it'll make any corrections that are necessary. So let me see if I can get it off quite a bit here. So he's pretty off there. You can see he's pointing almost completely left, but when I hold this down, see, it corrects it almost instantly. So that's the way I like to play, with my custom spinner handle here set on real controls and just mapping that center disc increase to a button nearby the spinner. So what I'm going to do now is actually play through all the levels in the Class 1 and show you what it looks like with my controller.
Get or die. Have a good one. Get or die. Get or die. go. Have fun.